Thank you for joining us today in this very important international solidarity event. My name is Monisha Ríos. I am a U.S. Army veteran. I'm a Viequense, a proud Puerto Rican, and I'm a member of the Executive Committee of the U.S. Peace Council. I welcome today, please join me in welcoming today our panelists from Culebra, Digna, Feliciano, Dulce, del Rio-Pineda. From Vieques, we have Elda. We will be joined by video by Erica. I will also be speaking a little bit. And we welcome from the Committee for International Solidarity and the Struggle for Peace of Venezuela, Gabriel Aguirre, representing the World Peace Council. And now we'll begin, and we'll start with a music video. This song was composed and performed by Lero Martinez Roldan, and it is to support our struggles here in Culebra and Vieques. And in one moment, you will see it. Thank you for watching that. And from here, we'll begin our conversation with Digna. Digna, if you could tell everyone who's watching, what are the struggles that Culebra has faced in the past, and what are the struggles that Culebra is facing today? And I'll start the timer for you.
Yes. Sí. Muy buen día. En el siglo pasado, al comienzo del siglo pasado.
Hello, good day. In the last century, at the beginning of the century, the Marine of the United States arrived here, and they took a decision to use the town of San Ildefonso that was to do their camp. So they started to leave their homes, and those who were able to bought a little piece of lot in Dewey, and the ones that were not able to went to uh, be near the ocean, and the ones that will not leave, they will cut the ice of the house, like we say it in Spanish, and they would push them into the maculares. That was the first thing that happened in Culebra. Then they divided the island. It was one island. In order to be able to build a channel so they can travel, they used dynamite in the area in the Lagoon Lavina, and they built a bridge that until this day, there's so many houses on the other side, it creates problems. Also, all of those people that don't have the title of the Spanish government, those people did not accept to keep the land. It was only those who had the title of the property were, they had the OP, so take it to San Juan and make sure that the land belonged to them. And that's what happened. After that, when they would do their maneuvers, they were very difficult. There were like 270 people living in the beach of Flamenco, and those people needed to leave their homes and move up the mountains to the Ayala home. So, and they will stay there until they would have their maneuvers. Also, the fishing people, they were not able to go out fishing, and the Culebra area was closed by sea and air. It didn't matter the day. And that was put on the Culebra mill so that we can be up to date, where they can go fish eventually. And they only had 4 employees at that time. There were a lot of accidents, deaths with artifacts. They will call it las escuadras when those men will arrive on a ship and they will camp on the town, and we had to close the homes because women were afraid. There were rapes or intent of rapes, and we needed to lock all women in their homes. It was very, very difficult. In my own personal experience, I had some dreams of airplanes following me, and I would be an airplane flying away. And also when I spoke with my mom, she told me about the explosion of her own observatory by the Marines. And at that time, you needed to paint the homes of green so that they wouldn't get confused with others. Some of the schools here in town, they also worked by bombs. At that time, they had a very difficult life. The Monching, Ramon Feliciano, the ex-mayor, he was working on the telegraph. 2 ladies asked him to buy them radios. Those radios were given to them. And at some point, the radio of Doña Lumi, like we used to call her, she heard the conversation between the Ulsa Rose base and Bill Mary. That's how they would call the observatory in the Culebra Island. She found out that they were going to do practices, military exercises, where her husband, Monse, and Carlos Cecilio were working. Their work was to prepare the carts for the bombing. So she was able to call, or didn't really call, she looked for the Mudo. And Mudo, she did some signs, and Mudo went running to the Flamenco beach where they were working. They did some signals that airplanes were coming, and they left running. And as soon as they were running away, they started bombarding the area. Then they found out, the bosses found out, the ones that were in charge, of how they were able to find out that they were going to bomb, and they came to ask for the radios. In the case of the Nyalumi, the Nyalumi told them, because she understood English perfectly, she said no, that radio belonged to her. And that radio she will not give back. In the case of Doña Juana Solis, she turned in hers. And those are cases that are very important in the history of Culebra. At the same time, family separation, all those families that needed to leave Culebra because they were kicked out of the flamenco area for whatever reason. Many wanting to come back died along the way we say it. Families that didn't know each other, siblings that never got to know each other. In the case of my father, he was able to meet his brother at the age of 54. There were situations that were very difficult in Culebra Island. Well, what emotions come up? It's not easy. We'll see. In one occasion, there's an Operation Screenboard. That was a period where distinct countries, they would pay the United States Marine for using their cards. And that happened throughout those years. So they made money. They didn't do anything here for the economy or the infrastructure of Culebra. Nothing at all. So in one occasion, a Brazilian ship was going from the north to Las Tarjetas, and two of those bombs. I was in the camp area with my daughter, and a bomb landed on each side. I was ill for a week until this day. My daughter has hearing problems because of that. In this particular case, the police was able to see this because they were at a hilltop, their offices, and they moved immediately and they stopped the military exercises. there was a lot of harm. They used us for many military exercises, and every time a new situation happens, we fear that what's going on, it would be an additional military exercise. I don't know if this is why we are not at peace. We don't accept in many occasions many ideas, because I think that's the reason why, the fact that we were used in that matter.
Additionally, I can say that Agent Orange was tried here, and the U.S. Marine we were never able to find out if they had documented anything, because nothing shows up on the record. And here the lagoon of the Sony Lagoon, it completely died, as many as the small islands surrounding it. And my brother, I understand, my belief is that my brother died of due to Agent Orange exposure. Thank you.
Thank you, Digna. I wish we had more time, because I didn't want to stop you in the middle of that. And I know there's so much that needs to be said about our reality. So I thank you for sharing what you've shared. And I hope we'll come back to you too. We'll have time for questions and answers. And so if there's anything else that you want to add, there will be a chance. And so now I apologize also with the video before. That was my mistake. I didn't click the box for audio. So I'll play it again at the end if there's time. And so now we'll switch over to hear a video with audio of Erica, who is a Viequense, and she will talk also about the conditions in Vieques. So give me just one moment. So it looks like I'm having more technical difficulties with that. So let's go to Elda. And Elda, same question. Could you talk about the conditions of Vieques, and what's going on, what happened a little bit in the past, and what's happening now? And while you do that, I'll try to work out the other issue so we can hear from Erica as well. Thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Elda Guadalupe. Thank you for the opportunity. and for the interest that you have on these islands who are municipalities. So to try to have enough time to talk about past and present, I'm going to be very succinct. So if we talk about the past struggles, I can say that they are very similar to the ones that Digna talked about the struggles in Culebra, which also includes that the U.S. Navy, how they displace people to establish their military bases, where they basically left people without home, and they left them with the pieces of wood that they could in lands that they don't know, and they had to find a way to redo their homes in a place that they didn't have their food, their harvest, their space. So that part about the past, I know that I know it's still, and even though we didn't live through it, I know it's in our feeling as a people. And the military practices and all the toxic material that were used, that were in the disclosure list, because we know that there are some toxic and contaminants that they haven't accepted or acknowledged that they used. So that the fact that they use 2/3 of what is the Vieques to do those military exercises left just 1/3 for the population that is the central part of the island. And that's where the population was living there with a lot of movement restrictions when there were military exercises. As Digna mentioned, your day-to-day life, you are listening, military caravans, airplanes, bombardments, and also fishing restrictions. So that is basically is a past struggle, not because there are no more residue or feelings about it, but because we already are in another phase of this battle, which is the cleanup, the recovery of those terrains, and another past struggle that has been with the government of Puerto Rico. It's our struggles that continue and still have not, which is the a just transportation system. In the 1960s, it was established as a government service, and to this day, they have not been able to provide a just and dignified transportation service. The struggle for health services, ironically, in the past, we had more health services than we do now in current times. And I'm going to go through the current issues, and I'm going to start with the health problems. The health services right now, we don't have a hospital right now. With the specialists that are required, there are some specialists that are now arriving in Vieques through IPA 650, but there is not stability or a hospital where we have those services in case of emergency. It's not the same thing to have an appointment in that versus needing something in case of emergency and there's no specialist there for that, or that there's no machinery or prescriptions or medications. Many times, it has happened many times that people get to the emergency room in Vieques, and because they're not seen on time or accurately, they die. We do not have air ambulance to be able to move those cases to the main island, and which may allow them to survive if done in a timely manner. We also recently, it was really January of last year, we had the unfortunate event of a 12-year-old girl that died because she had to wait 5 hours to for transportation to be transported to the other island because there was no ventilator for her for 5 hours to keep her alive. That's one of many cases. If we go and ask, there are many, many cases of people that have passed away because they did not receive health services in a timely manner, and there was no air ambulance that would take them from that island to the main island. And we also have the issue of food. There's many reasons why there's a lack of food around here. There is a term in use in English, which is called food desert. We understand that Vieques is a food desert for various reasons. The first one is that the food, we can say that in the large island, they import around 84% of what gets consumed. In Vieques, we can say that we import 98% of what we consume. That 98% arrives through the boat service of the Maritime Authority, which right now is in a private contract with another company. So every time the transportation system fails, we can see that the supermarkets don't have the fresh food that we need. And that's one of the reasons. The other reason is that simply many of the agricultural terrains are not affordable to be able to use them to produce. So to have enough production for the community. So between the boat services and the ground access, the access to land, there is a lack. There is a lack that of food, which sometimes, or not sometimes, many times it incurs in the health of people, because if you're not eating healthy because there are no enough fresh and healthy food options, and on top of that you add other environmental conditions like the one that Culebra and Vieques went through of military toxic waste, so that's going to be reflected in the health of people. So if it's reflected in the health of people, and on top of that you add that you don't have good health services, then we have some populations that are sick, that populations that are not going to have the same quality of life as other populations in Puerto Rico. And the same, I have another of the points here is transportation through boat, because many doctors, you have to actually go to the large island. The second university education, you have to go. Sometimes many people go to work, and they commute to work. People, and all of these things is interrupted by a boat service, a ferry service that is not consistent. The vision of who provides the service is a very tourist-based vision, and it's not to satisfy the needs of the residents of the island. Another one that I can add is that, displacement and gentrification, which right now we understand that there is a great population of professionals that are local people that went to school and came back to Vieques to work, and they don't find affordable homes for themselves so they can live. The places that are for sale, they will not be able to purchase. The places that are for rent, they will not be able to pay for unless 3 or 4 people come together to pay for a house. So we have a lack of housing that is dire for this population that is actually very young, but it's already functioning as professionals in Vieques. But I don't know if that happened that in Culebra, but there's a whole generation that is houseless right now. They don't have and without the possibility or without the hope of acquiring one, because the price, because a teacher, for example, we would say it's an example of that's the kind of career path that that new professionals seek in Vieques. A teacher cannot pay for rent. of $600 or $800 a month, and they cannot buy a home of $200,000 and $250,000. So we have a group of people that really they're not going to be able to acquire their property. And you see there the lack of or the lack of interest to make this happening, because there are many other options. There's a land trust or a housing co-op options, but there's no interest to develop that. So what we see the interest of is to sell, but to sell to larger capital, so to sell for more, or so that they do a development for a hotel. That interest is present, but not the interest to supply the local needs of people for housing.
I'm going to close saying that we have here a fight to motivate that the youth feels motivated to not be or feel stuck, that they feel useful, because it happens with gentrification that they take the space. And many times they think that tourism is everything. It's closing the doors to those who might understand that they don't, speak the English, and you see it in the collective self-esteem. So give more opportunities to local businesses, to the youth, recreation, education, educate for the condition that we have as an island, for the things that we have a education plan so that the residents can cover their own needs and not having to leave if they don't want to, unless they want to leave, but they don't have to think that they need to leave in order to work so that other people don't come in to take their places. And I think that's all I have for now. I think that I was going to add something else that I forgot to mention, is that right now we are fighting in Bicassin Valley a way to have less contaminants for the cleaning of the land, like detonation chambers, places to monitor the air, because right now we're not monitoring the air quality, because cleaning here, it's because they keep uh, trash, and then they'll go ahead and detonate them, and you can see large, like mushrooms, and you don't see, monitoring of air quality, of soil or water, and we don't know any of that. And that's something that we're asking, detonation chambers, because we know they exist, and they know that it's not cost effective or necessary.
Thank you, Elda.
Gracias. Elda.
It looks like I'm not going to be able to share the video of Erica as I hoped. I apologize to Erica, and I apologize to everyone else. She's a very powerful speaker, like all of these amazing leaders you see before you. I'll find a way to include that in a later recording, and perhaps we can do a different type of event later where she can be heard. So I'll come back to you, Dulce, and ask you, with everything that's been happening, what is the community doing to respond to these conditions, and how is the Puerto Rican government treating the community as they respond to their conditions?
Good morning, everyone. Are you okay? Here, in Culebra, what I want to bring up is to focus on how Digna shared, Elda shared, and what I can share now. Really, there's a similarity. At that time, when Digna shared with us, uh, the questioning, land titles, and that it's happening today. How she mentioned, the youth now are living with their parents, with their grandparents, because they don't have a dignified housing. There's no housing, but there is an interest to also push them away. And we're feeling that day in and day out, and it's becoming more verbalized more and more. It's not like, troops of Marines come dressed in white in Culebra, but we do see an ocean of people coming in with their trash, with their attitude. The other day, a peer was stating, why do they have to be so noisy? Why do they have to bring all their trash and not take it with them? There's been great impact, and someone wrote about this, post-traumatic stress. Something wrote that in the chat. It's a trauma upon trauma. They talked about, Puerto Rico, the experiences of the, Irma Maria, hurricanes, earthquakes, pandemic. We've been having the experience of trauma over another trauma. And when we talk about Vieques and Culebra, and we're not alone in the world, we're two small islands. We're a colony of the United States of America. We've been and continue to be part of that population impacted for many years, for hundreds of years of trauma. So the attention that you are giving us at this time, we are grateful for that, and it gives us hope. So from the point of view of hope, I am sharing what we are doing. What are we doing? Our youth are giving us cátedra, basically throwing themselves into the ocean to be able to save that belongs to us, that's ours, which is why now we have some young people that are being accused and persecuted for declaring, for demanding what belongs to us. In this case, it was dignified transportation. The Marines arrived and they pushed people away. So now there are interests of big executives to continue to push people away. They prohibit access. For example, in Culebra, El Mollecito. Those are spaces like the observation point of the United States Marine. It's a place where the Culebra people traspasó las alambradas, like the song says, to rescue the flamenco beach, so that now there's not a right to be able to be in that space. The fishermen and women people, they had a warning that was put on the newspaper that says don't go out because there's going to be some bombing. So now they have a hard time fishing because of larger interest. This is what's happening in Culebra and maybe Vieques as well. They're organizing and looking for strategies to continue to move forward, and we need each and every one of you to support us and be in solidarity in these new opportunities that are opening. Digna stated the school was at the Son de las Bombas. There's a organization called Música pa Culebra that are teaching our youth to dance La Bomba. here in Culebra, what you hear more, it's like the Estildrom, because we're really close to our Virgin Islands that are sister to us. So we're transforming the experience that we have in the past generation, but creating an impact. And I hope that maybe Digna uh, can share this letter that she wrote to President Clinton, or maybe we can share that with you, where she states the silence that many families had because of the pain of sharing the experiences. And it'll be great to hear the Bill Clinton's response and all the opportunities that Vieques and Culebra would have for supporting this abuse. Another topic that it's close is family separation that Digna also mentioned. And nowadays, this is happening, and it has to do with the topic that we talked about the land, housing, or lack of housing for the youth, especially in our communities. What has this caused? It has dismembered our community, and they have to separate and go make a life at a different place. In us in Culebra, we know and recognize that this fight that all of these people had in Culebra for years, it will not be in vain. And today, which is why we are here with you all, presenting ourselves with our head held high and demanding the support that we need, especially for the people that are at this moment, Maria, it's her name in Culebra, Maria Garcia, Ismanuel in Vieques, with Gustavo and Tiani, and we need to make sure that they will come out winners, and for once and for all, they would stop that persecution to the island, part of the archipelago de Puerto Rico. Vieques and Culebra, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dulce. So in a way, it works out better for us that we're not able to show the videos, because it does give you more time. Elda, Dulce, Digna, also Gabriel, and myself to talk more in depth about some of these things. So now I'll talk a little bit about the geopolitical implications of our situation here. So as I mentioned when I introduced myself, I'm a veteran. I was in the US military, specifically in the Army. And it's important also to mention that tomorrow is the 123rd anniversary of the US invasion of Puerto Rico in Guanica. So for 123 years, Puerto Rico has been a tool for the US's goals of global domination and global expansion and imperialism. And so what that means for us is that just like the Spaniards valued our land and our waters and our bodies for the purposes we fulfilled for them militarily, the US had the same goals. And the US had its eyes on our region for a long, long, long time. A long time, which is why they chose to invade and take us as war booty from Spain. So what that means for us in the context of Vieques and Culebra, when we look at how essential we have been. If you can look at videos from Congress, you can go on C-SPAN and look up for yourself their hearings that they had in response to the protests of Culebrenses and Viequenses, and what they would say, how essential our two islands were for national security. What that actually means is that our location in the Caribbean gave them tremendous access to their targets in Latin America, as well as other countries in the Caribbean. So their invasion, under the pretext of liberating us from Spain, was really just to solidify their own power in the Latin American and Caribbean region, as well as dominating trade routes, as well as having a launching pad to go further east. The US currently, I don't know the number, I know it's a lot of countries. The US is currently sanctioning, illegally sanctioning so many countries, it's insane. It's economic sanctions, it's cruel, it's coercive, it's punishing. It's all to impose its will on populations, to harm them and lead them into unrest. So this is part of the strategy of hybrid warfare. And this is part of what Puerto Rico is implicated in. And this is what the lives of Culebrenses and Viequenses are tied to. Because what that means, what that looks like on the ground, is what we're describing to you with our lived experiences. All of the nuclear, chemical, biological, psychological, conventional and unconventional warfare, to include sexual violence, which is a sanctioned weapon of war, despite how people want to say it isn't. All of that has been practiced here on innocent people, on non-combatants. And that goes out into the world, to Palestine, to Vietnam, to Iraq, to Iran, to Bolivia, to Venezuela, to Cuba, etc., etc., and harms those communities in the same way. And I bring up sanctions because when we look at how that global context, how US foreign policy is enacted in the world to ensure its presence as a global power, and how that translates into Puerto Rican domestic policy toward Vieques and Culebra, it's very interesting, because there are three areas in particular that these sanctions affect people: access to food, access to medical care, and freedom of movement. And as you've listened to Digna, Dulce, and Elda describe, for us, we suffer from lack of access to food, lack of access to medical care, and lack of freedom of movement. The Puerto Rican government right now, the people who are in power now, desire to become part of the United States. And so their philosophy, their ethic, all of that embodies the same philosophy and ethic of the United States. And we feel that here, especially because Culebrenses and Viequenses said no. They said no to the Navy. They said no to US domination, no to imperialism, no to all of that, and demanded that their human rights and dignity be respected. Just like innocent people around the world that are currently under attack by the United States are doing, and are also being punished in similar ways. They've also mentioned how other countries, such as NATO forces and other Latin American countries, and even some Caribbean countries, rented our lands, our waters, and our lives as targets. We still don't know what ordnance they used, what were the weapon systems that they were testing. We do not enjoy the benefit of them taking responsibility for how their actions and choices also harmed our environment and our collective health. So there are still, it's not only the United States that has a part to play in this, it's also the Puerto Rican government, and it's also who knows how many countries in the world that for the 70-something years that they abused Culebra and the 62 years that they abused Vieques in various combinations, how are we to know? How are we to be able to assess what exactly we're dealing with? And we cannot get accurate information from the Navy, which is not surprising. And it would be helpful to be able to get information perhaps if other nations are willing to let us know, to make reparations, to help us gain access to food, to our health, and freedom of movement that every human being has the right to enjoy. And not only for ourselves, but for our non-human relatives as well. The horses that roam freely in Vieques, the crabs, the fish that we like to eat, the beautiful trees and the vegetation that we get to enjoy. Everything has been affected. Every life has been harmed. And I've gotten completely off of track of what I was going to say because this hurts me so much. And the final point that I want to make is that when we look at what Puerto Rico's role in the world has been, even though we are a colonized people, we are not free. We do not have the political power or the economic power to make our own decisions about how we interact with other countries, about how we interact with other peoples who are our relatives and our friends. We're prevented from having cooperation and peaceful relationships and love between us. But we are also implicated in the harm that is being done. And this is part of the sickness of colonialism in all the different ways that it pits us against one another as it kills us too. So with that, I'll close, and I hope I'll get a little bit more into some of what I said in the question and answer session. But for now, please join me in welcoming our special guest from Venezuela, Gabriel Aguirre. Please, Gabriel, introduce yourself and take it away.
Very interesting and very important what you have shared with us and your fighters that are in these cities, they're activists and who are without doubt at the forefront of the battle, the objectives and the wins you propose to achieve in the current moment that you are in Puerto Rico as a nation, but also in terms of Vieques and Culebra as an integral part of that effort. And what I hope is a free and sovereign country. Today, I am speaking from the World Peace Council, and I fight for the peace in Venezuela, and I bring you what we have to say as an organization. First of all, I want to thank, in terms of the World Peace Council and its affiliate organization, to the importation organized by the US Peace Council with the co-organization for the and organized with the World Peace Councils. Without a doubt, the fight for independence in Puerto Rico is closely linked to the fight for peace, and organizations around the world that maintain their flag high in the Caribbean nation. For us, the situation that is developing right now is characterized by a display of imperialist forces that maintain a fight for the control of resources and this complex it has its characteristics, militarism, and sending troops outside of the excessive military expense and more materials, and the existence of dispositions of military weapons. All of these are aspects that easily signals the harms that we are confronting as part of the imperialist policy of the past year. The U.S., aside from establishing a financial dominance in the world, they try to maintain and support their military through the political control in territories in foreign places. And basically this kind of colonialism brought inevitably the deep struggle of people due to the defense of their sovereignty, independence, and self-determination. And in that, we should mention specifically the people of Puerto Rico, which due to the terrible consequences due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the incessant aggressions and the threats against the people have maintained they have made calls by peoples of the world, the organizations, and even some voices that are important around the community to stop the armed conflict. There are humanitarian channels to allow the entry of medicines and food to the countries that have been imposed, and to flexibilize the conditions and to guarantee the humanitarian principles for the care of migrants and refugees, as well as requests to put an end to all existing colonies in the world. Just this year marked the 40th time, the time that the Committee for the Protection of the UN Committee of Decolonization has demanded respect for the inalienable right of the people of Puerto Rico to their independence, despite it not being possible to achieve that. So it's proved in first place the need to reform the system of the UN, and in second place that it not just be with the declaration of an organization that is an international issue that we're going to be able to put an end to all ways of colonialism and neocolonialism around the world, but it should be through the effective action and collective action of the peoples that we're going to achieve those things. The historic position of our organizations has been to struggle against all forms of domination, exploitation, and ransacking around the world. The World Peace Councils, we have always been on the side of just causes because we understand that the fight for struggle is without a doubt linked to the right to build. The situation facing Puerto Rico is marked by the alarming rise in social indicators that show that poverty is close to 50% based on lack of assistance from those who run the colonial government, the country's health problems, which have also been aggravated by the pandemic, the problem in basic services added to the migratory crisis, and the rampant corruptions are aspects that make clear that the U.S. central government is taking advantage of its position in the country as a privileged position, geopolitical persons, but in return leaves only hunger and misery in the Caribbean island. These situations also happen in Vieques and Culebra, where today they confront a complex social situation because they confront the situation, the consequences of barbaric colonialism in these territories, which are in complete abandonment with many problems in food and gas and health supply, but whose will of us population has been very courageous, and we acknowledge the disposition of fighting for its people when in 2003 they expelled the U.S. Navy of it has been precisely the U.S. military presence in the islands of Vieques and Culebra which has caused the structural environmental damage which have as a result of military maneuvers and the use of these territories to test their nuclear weapons. Some studies indicate that close to 30% of the population has cancer-related disease illnesses as a result of using these territories to test chemical waste. So the struggle of the Puerto Rican people has always been accompanied by the World Peace Councils. We promote multiple campaigns for the independence of Puerto Rico, to put an end to colonialism, to demand the withdrawal of the U.S. military presence in their territory, which is also used as a platform of aggression against other people in the continent like Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. From our organization, we have always been firm and active in the defense of the liberation of Oscar Lopez Rivera, which is an independence fighter who was illegally imprisoned, who was for more than 36 years in the United States just for raising the flags of a free and sovereign nation. Since our last World Assembly held in San Luis de Maranhão in Brazil in 2016, we adopted a declaration to approve and urge then President Barack Obama for this immediate release, a fact that was fulfilled months later and that reaffirmed the need not to abandon any of those who struggle for the construction of a more just society. Like Oscar Lopez Rivera, we demand the respect of human rights of hundreds of fighters in Puerto Rico who are still in prison, and we demand their immediate release. It's not a crime to defend the right to self-determination. It is not a crime to fight against an oppressive system of human freedom. It's not a crime to demand a better future for Puerto Rico. Today, we ratify our full solidarity with Puerto Rico as organizations in the has said America will not be complete if Puerto Rico is missing. As an international organization, we say that the world will not be complete as long as colonies and territories are occupied by imperialist powers like Puerto Rico, Palestina, the Sahara, the Falklands, and so many other peoples that today are defined as living as colonies or fighting for their independence and definite liberation. We are convinced, because that's how history has proven, about its Puerto Rican people's courage and their underlying irreducible decision to be independent and sovereign. And for this reason, they will always count on the support, accompaniment, and solidarity of the peoples of the world. Finally, we cannot not mention that today, July 24th, while this event is happening, we also commemorate the birth of Simón Bolívar, the architect of the independence of several peoples of the American continent, like Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador, but also a forger of the continental dream of Latin America, who had the honor of visiting the small island of Vieques on August 5th, 1816. During his visit, the servant of Spain in Vieques was surnamed Rosello. By coincidence, Puerto Rico was governed by a Rosello, but this time no longer serving the Spanish Empire, but American imperialism. In Bolivar's thinking, it is able to summarize the yearnings of independence of our people and Latin America. Only with unity will it be possible peace, international justice, and universal equilibrium. And those are Bolivar's words. So free, long live independent and free Puerto Rico.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And yes, happy birthday, Simón Bolívar. We have his bust here in our central square that was gifted to us from Venezuela. And there was a ceremony earlier today to honor him. And so it looks like we'll have some extra time. Please pardon the dogs. We'll have extra time to go into questions and answers. So before we do that, I would like to ask if Elda, Dulce, or Digna, if you have any other quick thoughts that you want to share with people before we start taking their questions. Please go ahead.
This is Dulce from Culebra. Something that impresses me, it's what's being talked in the chat box, connecting and the solidarity that it's known of us, all our brothers and sisters from here. People say that, you know, that Puerto Ricans have a solidarity gene, and we've been able to see that through many of the traumas. So we also wanted to mention that we are thankful to the words of Gabriel and that light that keeps us and what word should I use? That has us hooked, like we say here, to continue with this demand. All I want to add, it's a brief history that happened recently and that has marked me, and I haven't been able to make it public. I shared it with my daughter that was here connected, but July 18th, those who are here in the Municipio Island, they know that date. Even the images that Monisha presented at the beginning, you would see the bikes. That July 18, for about a month previous to that, we started a talk with some youth from Culebra who are working in a project called El Coqui, which is a project to give them hope and tools, knowledge that they deserve, like the Elda mentioned, so they can continue to contribute to their community. And it's about a construction of a small house that has like a lab. It's a construction. It's a safe construction because for hurricanes, it has water. It has some agriculture, plantation, and also solar energy. All of that in a small house so that our youth can build it so that our little ones can play there and they can start experimenting of what they have a right of. So we're pretty excited. Even, my daughter who was in charge to talk to the peers of Fideicomiso and PDO Mark, Somara, Wilton Girls Club, and Vieques, with Ila, with Erika, who's not here with us connected, but I know that she's with us in spirit that unifies us. She would go and cook in front of the beach. I have so much hope. Like we say here, I get like goosebumps, when I talk about it. And they were so excited. And what did they give us? They will not be the trip from Vieques Culebras like they did that for a couple of months because people were not traveling. I couldn't tell you all the excuses that were given to me. It's not worth repeating them. But the main point of this is that they told us, without really telling us, that it's not worth it, that our youth aren't worth it to make a trip from Culebra to Vieques to share with our youth of Vieques, that it's not worth it, that it is not on the schedule because people weren't traveling. And I think Digna wants to add something. Eh, on that same topic, what I was able to see is that the cost for each additional trip that this company would be making, they would charge to Vieques an amount that's a little bit less and Culebra a little bit more because it's further away and that for them it's expensive. Yeah, but we're talking about a trip from Culebra and Vieques. Yeah, it's the same because of this company, and for them, it will not be cost effective. And I'm going to continue along this line that Digna started because we're repeating here again the effective cost at the short and long end. It is a lot worse to leave our youth, like we say here, guindaos, without that experience. And that same day, they provide a trip for a cycling event. So that July 18, we will remember, a lot of us will remember. And people demand, and they're like, talk to the youth, organize them, make them fight, make them demand. It's not just. And I asked them, because I want an answer today. What can we do and what should we tell our youth when we've been fighting for years, marching, demanding? How do we do it to make sure that they will have an opportunity and that they will have an opportunity? Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Dulce. Elda, did you have anything?
Yes, I first want to thank Gabriel. Very important words. I was reading in the chat box, and I think that something that I read that I'm not seeing, it has to do with how the Puerto Rican government negates the island municipio this. Not the autodetermination, because I know that we're part of Puerto Rico, but, you know, govern with more autonomy. And I say this because the Puerto Rican government, or they treat the municipio island like any other town of Puerto Rico, and they don't really understand its per difference. And sometimes they do it manifesting a colonial sentiment that's more powerful. Sometimes we say that we live in the colony of the colony. Like Puerto Rico, it's a colony, but we're a colony of Puerto Rico because constantly the central government continue to extract, like they, say richness or wealth. It doesn't have to be money, but through, tourism, like in Vieques and Culebra. In Vieques, every person that goes and visits the Bionicente Bay, I don't know if you know what the bay is, but it's a body of water. During the night, it has some organism that shine. It's a magical show. But those who get the money for every visitor, it's not in the uh, Vieques, it's the state government, and they take all that money. And what they give Vieques, it's almost nothing. Same thing as the room tax. I think it's the same thing in Culebra. Like in Airbnb, there's like 300 Airbnbs. Those are the ones that are registered, that they can charge up to 1,000 or something. And the ones that aren't B&B, the room tax, it's like 7%. The state takes that. And when they give, from tourism, might be like 2 pictures in their magazines. Constantly, we are being sabotaged by the Puerto Rican government. And there are laws that they also have in Culebra that don't make sense. For example, in no other state road in Puerto Rico, you would see golf carts. But you come into Vieques and Culebra, and the golf carts can be on the main roads. And you can be on a hurry because you're on your way to work, and there can be 5 golf carts in front of you. Then you have to wait. And they're going 50 miles per hour. Because the vision that the government has is that, like, nobody works. Everybody here, it's a tourist. There's a sticker that they put on the cars that I want to peel them off. This says, what's the hurry? You live in Vieques. Like, everybody comes to vacation in Vieques. You have to live like you're on vacation. That is not true. That's what they want us to see. We are a town where people work, and we have a right to work and to have it life, and that's okay. We accept tourism, but it has to be a tourism that helps the local, that helps so that the local community benefit from the tourism. Not only benefits, but also the participation of planifying the tourism so that they don't interrupt our daily life. Because nobody wants to see 5 golf carts on the road when you're on your way to work. It has to be in agreement with our daily lives. And yes, I want to point out what Dulce stated, that we have 4 manifestors who are being targeted by the government. And these people who were manifesting, what they did is they manifest in the water to make it clear so that they can hear the voice. Otherwise, they wouldn't be media coverage, because that's another thing. The media does not give you the attention if you don't do anything extreme. So what they did a civil disobedience, and they've been persecuted, and they've been mistreated psychologically because they come to their appointments and they continue to postpone them, and they create a trauma. So if we can do or get something out of this, could be to speak up about this, to protest. It's not a crime. It's a torture that they're doing with this for uh, men and women. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Elda. So we have about 5 minutes until our scheduled question and answer time, which means we have 35 minutes left to the event. So I see your hand, Dulce e Digna. Please go ahead.
Yes, what I want to say is that something that we can be proud of, and I've been reading what Martin Walker wrote in Culebra, which is different what happened in our sister island in Vieques. I don't know. I don't know what word can we use. That there's the 66 law that creates, like, even in Puerto Rico or those in the assembly, they don't know what AGDEC. AGDEC is the Authority of Conservation and Development of Culebra. And it says that when a United States Marine leaves Culebra, prevents from things that are happening today to happen. And why is that? Because there continues to be violence in terms of conservation land. They get rid of agricultural spaces, and that authority, which is the only one that exists, above any region, they're basically choking it. So I want to take advantage of this so that we can let our government of Puerto Rico that we will not allow for any reason, any possible reason, if they want to make us unite with other agencies or organization to create like potluck to have more funding, we're not going to do that. So we want to be and try and use this organization that is based in the Culebra town, can be done in Vieques as well, to continue to Rincon and Cabo Rojo. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. Digna will talk more about that. A few more words. So this law that happened with the Interior Department and the government of Puerto Rico, it cannot be changed or eliminated unless it goes back to the United States Congress. So the government of Puerto Rico at a state level, they're trying to eliminate the 66 law to give or let the law 22 that currently is going on. In order to make a change, they need to go to the Congress. And they say, look, people are saying that it's a colony, but they also want the Congress to have authority over the change. But when you are the colony, in this case, Culebra is the colony of the colony, but it's also, we feel that we're part of the other colony because we depend of basic things like water, electricity, of what goes through Vieques. So a few weeks ago, we were without any water for 4 days because of some plumbing that was broken in Guaguabo. There's no, energy or water. Culebra being, the first place that they had a sanitizing plant to be able to provide to the community. So today we want to finish this presentation that we know that there's not much left of it from our part. We want to demand that ADEC continues to be the authority with all of its power and to give funding like it's required, and that it continues to support, or that we start to support the efforts of, I don't want to say autodetermination like Elda mentioned, but yes, we want to have a sovereignty when it comes to food, also to expand, water capture and also solar renewable energy. I don't know if you want to add any other words to close this presentations, because you've been to the Congress many times to claim this. Well, in terms of the authority of conservation and development, there's a concept of giving us some rights of the Culebrenses. In many occasions, we've demanded some rights. They tell us that is anti-constitutional. And my understanding is that we deserve Vieques and Culebra to give, because we gave so much for the national security. I think that we deserve a lot more that they are giving us. Thank you.
Thank you both. And I agree. So now we are in our final 29 minutes. Thank you again to everyone that's been here. Thank you, Gabriel, for your presence. Thank you to the US Peace Council for giving us a platform. Thank you to Black Alliance for Peace and the World Peace Council for co-sponsoring. Thank you so much to our interpreters. I would love to honor you, Abraham and Patri. Without you, we could not build this bridge. You are an essential service. And I want to add just a little bit myself, being Viequense, before going to the questions, if that's okay. Tourism, as it's been said, can be problematic here. And something that doesn't get talked about, but that needs to get talked about, is the abuse that comes from unethical people in the tourism industry. Whenever a Culebrense or a Viequense calls out the lack of ethics. And that's really what it comes down to. There is an ethical way of touring the world and visiting and exchanging cultures and building peace among people and communicating. There is a lack of ethic in the tourism industry in Puerto Rico, and there's a lack of ethic in the tourism industry in our tiny islands. And we have to be able to say this out loud. And we have to acknowledge that when we do, abuse happens. Abuse happens online, it happens in person, and that is unacceptable. And so for everyone who does want to visit us and share in the beauty of our islands and our culture and eat good food and dance with us, please come. Please come responsibly and respectfully, or don't come. And to everyone who operates a business that benefits from tourism, that you feed your families from tourism, that we have to survive in the economy that has been created for us, right? And it's tourism dependent at this moment, But please consider your impact. And please consider that when people ask for better treatment and when people ask for changes to how business is done, you have the responsibility to listen to those people. You do not own us. So from there, I would like to go to one of the first questions that we received in the chat from Pablo. Thank you for joining us from Chile. Pablo's question is about victims from contamination from Agent Orange and other toxins that the U.S. military left behind. Quería preguntar si hay otras víctimas por la contaminación. I'm gonna beef this word, contaminant. Forgive me, I'm learning. Contamination del agente naranja u otros tóxicos que dejaron los militares de estadounidense. So would any of the panelists like to take that question?
I can say that in the revision advisory board, which it's a group that needs to form in terms of the cleanup, where the military practices were happening, and the studies that TSDR, I don't know which one, but these are federal agencies. They have never established the link between military contamination and the health problems in Vieques. Actually, in very few places they have found military contamination in the studies that they have done, but Professor Arturo Masu and Fernandez Porto and Jorge Colón. There are many studies that have established that the links and have established the contaminants. However, this has never been accepted by the Navy or by the federal agencies to establish those links. So even though we have the knowledge and we have the studies where that can be based out of that there's a great number of cancer that exists in Vieques, and I say Vieques because I'm not sure about the facts of Culebra, but through independent studies or through the universities in Puerto Rico, we have been able to establish in an official way with the U.S. Navy or the Interior Department, all of that, because the studies that they use are not have those findings, and they don't accept the studies that have been done independently.
Thank you, Elda.
I wanted to add that I was talking with Digna because a dear person in our community just passed away that came to live here from the US. And we thought we were listening, Elda. I am not sure if that they want to admit that they did it or not. We know enough, and we know enough people to recognize that this existed, and to show that this didn't exist. They should prove them, that they should bring out the studies where it says that they did all of that and that they didn't find anything, because I know they done studies, oh, this happened, but they should themselves that they need to justify before us what we are claiming. Who would like to make up that people are dying due to the effects of health when I think Martin has explained that as a psychology, and those of us who know early childhood, we talk about any person of the field psychology can talk about ACE, which is adverse childhood experiences, and that has demonstrated that in older adults, there has been multiple studies that all of a sudden have diabetes, high blood pressure, and when you look into their childhood and the experience had done Agent Orange, Purple Agent,